The fifth episode of Sandman 24/7 covers two comic issues. Issue number 6, 24 Hours, the diner sequence, and issue number 7, Sound and Fury, the confrontation between John and Morpheus. We dream back in possession of his hand and his helm. His last missing tool of office is his ruby, the magnificent dreamstone containing much of his power. But John Dee, son of Roderick Burgess and Ethel Cripps, claimed the ruby as his own years ago. This episode adapts the incredibly infamous 24 Hours issue of Sandman. For all the fans of the comics, it's been one of the most anticipated TV episodes, so let's dive deeper into this dark and rewarding episode. In the comics, John is drawn basically as this naked, solid brown skeleton, a skull with hair. He's not drawn like a human being. That's kind of a device for feeling his energy, and that was never going to translate well to a TV screen. The show tones down John Dee's deformed physical appearance. The comic character spends most of his time wearing nothing more than a large overcoat. While the coat made its way into the television adaptation, Netflix's John Dee also scores some pajamas to wear underneath as well. While the actor David Thewlis manages to properly convey the uneasy menace of John Dee, some viewers might miss his horrifying appearance as well. As we discussed in the last episode, the show decided very early on to change John's motivation, and John is now basically on a heroic mission to save the world with his ruby. John wanted one thing, a world without lies. He wants to save the world by unloading the burden of deceit, thinking that revealing the truth will set everyone free. His test subjects begin on a small scale, a couple of key characters who have the misfortune of being at a diner within walking distance of his storage unit in which he found the ruby. They are our gateway and focal point for John's bigger plan outside the walls of this establishment. With his magic ruby, he unleashes the most terrifying weapon of all, the truth, and the people in the diner lose their ability to lie, and they reveal hidden and sometimes dark truths that shatter their facades of happiness. John Dee sees himself as a crusader, a superhero of sorts. He is ridding the world of lies. It's a noble pursuit, but the deeply unsettling reality hits home. As we'll discover later in the episode, without lies, our world unravels. Now, in the comic, this was told over, as the title suggests, 24 hours. It's not exactly broken up that way in the episode. The panels reveal the hour and what John chooses to do with each 60-minute window of time. Neil Gaiman knew that he wanted an issue in which John Dee had control of the ruby and was driving the world mad. And his initial idea for the story was that we would go all over the world, we would follow a whole bunch of things everywhere. The initial inspiration for Neil was actually the fact that comics had 24 pages, and he thought he could do a comic that covers 24 hours and is 24 pages long. But then he realized he couldn't. But by that point, he was locked into that idea of going as far as he can. Of course, the panel-by-panel approach of hours only works for something fairly static and wouldn't have given a particularly nasty or twisted impression if we just jumped from moment to moment. It would have been too easy maybe. The show makes it blurrier, which is probably more effective. Both in the comic and the TV show, it all starts with Bette, a waitress with a college-age son who greets John with a smile and her best offer of coffee while he sets his story in motion. The waitress offers John Dee the line, "Honesty is the best policy," upon knowing him for less than 1 minute. John lays out his entire plan of how he's in possession of a special ruby, which he shows her, explaining that it makes dreams come true and that he dreams of a new, honest world. She takes it in stride and scoffs at the delivery of his plan. But unlike Rosemary from the previous episode, we're about to see another shade of someone lying, not out of fear exactly, but more as a natural reflex, a part of the facade she puts on for her job. She's lying to be liked, maybe to get better tips, to tell stories that offer people happy endings because life isn't going to do that. And when she does try for brutal honesty in what she wants from the cook Marsh, later in the episode, she gets slapped with the harsh reality of what has been kept from her. Bette is probably the most crucial character for the framing of this episode. Our waitress and aspiring writer is our link to every other character, and we have a reason to track her movements through the diner. Some tweaks were made to her story, but generally she's a little more real feeling than in the comics. In the comic, it's Bette, or the narration expressing Bette's viewpoint, that says the line about how the secret of happy endings is knowing when to stop, because every story ends in death if you keep going long enough. In the episode, John says it to Bette, who finds the idea new and troubling. We also meet Judy, who is reeling from a fight with her girlfriend Donna, Mark, who's an interview candidate for a job at Vanguard, Kate and Garry, who are married and work as the CEO and vice president at the same company, and Marsh, the cook. There are a few tweaks from the comic. Bette's writing in the comics is implied to be nothing more than an escape from her crappy life, as she believes she'll eventually become a famous novelist. In the show, Bette's goals are more humanized, with Dream explaining that she genuinely wants to make the world a better place through her storytelling. In the comic, while waiting in the diner, Judy starts to write a letter to Donna apologizing for hitting and abusing her. She doesn't do so in the episode and even claims that she would rather Donna get into a car accident than deliberately ignore her. In the comics, Bette imagined Judy would be better off with a husband out of homophobia. In the show, Bette tries pairing up Judy with Mark because she thinks Judy and Donna fight too much and Judy could do better. Bette is heterosexual in the comic and secretly expresses disgust at Judy's sexuality as an affront to God, but in the show, Bette will make out with Judy under the ruby's influence. In the episode, Marsh is the diner's cook. In the comic, the diner doesn't have a cook on shift and Marsh is one of the customers and a trucker. Marsh's relationship with Bette's son was occasional and very transactional. Bernard, Bette's son, would trade sex for cigarettes when they were both in prison. In the show, from Marsh's comments, we can conclude they have a casual but far more on-the-level relationship. Bette describes her son with whom Marsh is sleeping as just a kid. Marsh immediately corrects her that he's actually 21, but it is potentially implied that the relationship has been going on for more than 3 years. The roles of Kate and Garry have been shifted a bit as well. In the comic, Town Talk had it Garry married Kate for her money and there's no connection between them and Mark. It's unknown where Mark is going for an interview. In the show, when Bette tells Mark that the CEO of the company he's applying to is in the diner, indicating the booth where Garry and Kate are sitting, Mark's immediate assumption is that she means Garry. Donna sets him straight. Kate is the CEO, Garry is just a trophy husband and he's not depicted as such in the comic. Additional examples of the very bad secrets in the comics include that Marsh and Bette have been having their affair long before Marsh's wife, Marcia, died. The affair was actually responsible for Marcia's drinking problem and that Marsh encouraged it and fed the habit to eventually drink herself to death. Couple of more secrets from the comic are that Garry sleeps with prostitutes and beats them up afterwards. Kate had an intercourse with a corpse as well. Also, Bette is massively homophobic about Judy, which is very vaguely still in the show, not so outright prejudiced, more confused. And like we covered earlier, Marsh in the show has still been sleeping with Bette's son, but in a much less sinister way. All these really, truly horrible secrets about the characters are not part of this episode, which can potentially make the twisted things that happen to them feel a lot worse. The audience might feel that they don't deserve it. They aren't bad people being punished, they're just flawed people with normal secrets and normal lies. John at the start is yearning for people to choose the truth and respond honestly to one another. Worth remembering is that John has just come off a small killing spree, but he has seen some good in one person in the previous episode, in Rosemary, and that's why it's important to remember the power the ruby yields. John's character in the show has this thread of fragile innocence and desire to do good, to make people better, but as he continues using the ruby, which he hasn't in 30 years, it quickly corrupts him, and what he takes from it is the eventual eagerness to push these people into horror. It portrays John as somewhat of a victim and less like he had self-centered evil ambitions that a ruby is a useful tool for. John is almost like a victim of the ruby's pull. That's the main difference with the comics. The showrunner Alan Heiberg said it started with wanting to understand John Dee better and having more room in the TV show to explore John Dee's relationship with reality as he experiences it, and keeping enough of that character's backstory so that the fans recognize him, but also giving him a less nihilistic mission. In this version, he's a hero. He wants a world where the truth can actually be told. That's really all he wants. And the problem is, once people walk around and start to tell their truths, it becomes very uncomfortable very quickly. And the actor David Thewlis has given this character such a performance as well. John uses the ruby for the first time to ask Bette if she truly thinks he's handsome. He clutched the ruby and he asks her why she lied. It's really a startling moment and one that is uncomfortable in the sense that Bette has to think about this guard she puts up to do her job. It then extends to her facing Kate and Garry with the salad versus burger debacle. These small white lies, the ones where Bette tries to say Judy and Mark would make a good match to mask her convictions, Garry lying about the shipping order, Marsh saying he can't come over anymore, all ultimately build up to the climax of the episode. Marsh and his confession is the slowest and possibly the most painful. It shocks Bette and totally changes the tone of things moving forward. She can't keep the happy endings fixed in her mind, and things start to really get worse for everyone from here on out. It's after this upheaval in Bette's personal life that everyone partners up into a series of pairings who are somehow better suited and more equipped to genuinely connect. Marsh and Garry are left in the kitchen while Kate and Mark chat in the booth for an informal interview. In the comic, there's an orgy. Everybody's having sex with everybody and it's off-panel under the counter. In the show, we were building towards this sex and violence crescendo, and obviously Judy's sexuality is overt in the comic and becomes a point of conflict for her. She feels that Bette treats her differently because of her sexuality. We learn in the comic that Marsh has actually had sex with Bette's son in prison, so Marsh's sexuality is twisted in a way as well that Bette has no idea about. The showrunners didn't think the orgy is going to be the way to go, but if they coupled them off in surprising ways, we knew that Mark and Kate were going to end up together because Garry was going to be jealous as he's in the comics, and that's where the murder was going to happen. We know Marsh is gay from the comics, so they made Garry a sex addict, and that's one of the secrets, one of the lies he's keeping from Kate, and it all seemed very organic according to the showrunners. And Bette, who seems overly interested in Judy's sex life, doesn't think her partner Donna is good enough, and this moment blows Judy away. Judy's issues, however, remain the same as in the book's canon because the off-screen ex-girlfriend Donna has a role to play down the line. These two are also friends with Rose Walker, and we got our first glimpse of Rose here on the video called Judy, just as we saw Judy call her in the comic. Rose Walker will be important later in the season. There's a scene where John D goes to the fridge and gets himself some ice cream and goes back to the counter and sits and eats it while all around him terrible things are happening that he's paying very little attention to. He just walks through and gets his ice cream. In the interview with Netflix, Neil Gaiman said he thinks it's one of his favorite scenes in the entirety of the 10 hours of Sandman. It's just John D getting some ice cream, so there you go. The show embraced the source material and brought it to a new level by the merits of the strength of television, by having actors, by having real people embody these characters, and by the virtue of us, the audience, being confined to this diner. With them, we become a part of the torture. In the comic, Mark loses the fight with Garry, who rips the younger man's throat out with his teeth. For good measure, the reasons for the fight are different as well, with John having mentally regressed the diner's patrons to the levels of animals and prodded Garry and Mark into fighting for dominance. In the show, Garry loses when Mark stabs him in the neck, and they fight after Garry realized Mark hooked up with Kate. In the comic, Judy is the one who stabs herself through the eyes with metal skewers. Her eyes remain happily untouched in the series, her wrists less so, with Bette taking the skewers in her stead. After John has Bette blind herself, he asks the Fates to tell him his future, and they speak to him through the bodies of his victims. The return of the Hecate is quite interesting because we get the same gist of what we saw with Dream's interaction, but he asks the same question 3 times with 3 different answers. The 3 versions of the future revealed to him go from universal, you come from dust, you walk to dust, you go back to dust, to a bit more specific, it is bound by walls and guards in the sour cell of madness, to finally something John can work with. You have stolen some of the power of dreams, you will take all of it, you will crush the Dream Lord's life in your hands. Shortly after, Dream arrives at the diner. Episode 5 covers the 2 comic issues, issue number 6, 24 Hours, and issue number 7, Sound and Fury. The arrival of Morpheus marks the beginning of issue number 7 of the comics, Sound and Fury. The actual title of the comic issue is a reference to The Sound and the Fury, the 4th novel of William Faulkner. The title comes from Macbeth's soliloquy in scene 5 of the Scottish play. Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury revolves around a certain sequence of events told from several different points of view. As each narrator relates their story, the reader discovers that characters may be unreliable when it comes to narrating certain events, and the novel is also told in a stream of conscience and portrays characters' thought process. That sometimes means that there's no distinction between one thought and the next. The mind is depicted to simply flow from one topic to the next. John D thinks and operates in such a style as well. John D is somebody who's just as damaged, just as monstrous as he was in the comics. He's not a good person, but you realize the thing that actually tipped him over the edge was the fact that he was raised in a world of lies. And in his crooked, bent, half-destroyed way, what he believes he's seeking is the truth. And what he's trying to do is liberate people into truth. And of course, the world can only take so much truth. John claimed that removing the things he saw as lies showed the truth of mankind, but Dream has an alternative opinion, which is that the lies people tell each other, not the bad faith lies, the general daily lies, are more related to dreams and hopes. They can come from a place of hope to change. Choices people make, which they aren't entirely happy with, are still those of hope and dreams. He says that what John has done is strip people of their hope, and that act removes their resilience to cope with the now, to hold on to the dream of a better future, to be better. Dreams are not lies, dreams are a form of hope. As Dream said in the episode, their dreams kept them alive, but if you rob them of their dreams, if you take away their hope, then yes, this is the truth of mankind. And John seems quite shocked by this new angle. Hope did just defeat Lucifer in the previous episode, so Dream has a point. Dream is also quick to add that John is being hurt by the ruby, implying that it's not that he's an inherently selfish person either. He had choices in the matter, but they were overwhelmed by the power not meant for him to deal with. And it's all traced back to lie and theft, but righting the wrong of his mother doesn't have to be an action against the entire world. However, if John does need to make a move against Dream using his power, then it should be in his realm. This part in the show does see John go somewhat full egomaniac and hungry for power. They needed to find a way into that somehow, and I think it worked despite him not having that prior energy. His drive here seems to come from seeing the dreaming as the wrong thing to do, and the title thrown at Morpheus, King of Lies, just about sums up his angle here. That also references that the animosity between Dream and John has historical reference. John is Roderick Burgess's biological child. This is the resolution of a conflict that was established in episode 1, essentially between Burgess and Dream. Now it's been passed down a generation to his son, so it feels inevitable. Story-wise, this was executed and explained fairly well. It had so much power, especially with Dream, who's coming out of hell and had just faced Lucifer, having to examine what hope is and what hope means for himself, and to then bring it back into the waking world with him. On the other hand, while I think Tom Sturridge does a brilliant job in general, the entire episode deflates as soon as he walks on screen. Thulis, or John D, was such a quietly commanding presence that Sturridge, aka Dream, can scarcely compare with his detached approach. In the comics, Dee enters the dreaming dressed as Julius Caesar. The three ladies are probably not the Hecate, but are simply inhabitants of the dreaming. Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar does not include a dream such as Dee's. In one of the panels, there's also a picture in the background of Ethel D, John Dee's mother. The photo is the same which appears in the Sandman issue number 1 in Hands of Ruther and Sykes, and then also later in the series as well. The inscription on it is, "To Roddy," referring to Roderick Burgess, "your slave in love, Ethel, 1927. We also have the appearance of Eve, the Raven Woman. Eve has previously appeared in earlier issues, as we covered in the review of episode 2, along with Cain and Abel. Throughout the series, comparing characters to Dream is a standard method by which we can gain an understanding of his character. For example, Lee has been driven insane by the loss of his dreams. Morpheus, on the other hand, survived for 70 years in a fishbowl without them. At the climax of the story arc, we see just how little D is, and by comparison how big Morpheus is. We also see that he is not concerned with justice, rather he is concerned with revenge. Dream's act of mercy in the end makes sense because Dream is empathetic in that moment in a way that he probably wouldn't have been if he hadn't met Joanna Constantine and Lucifer. He could crush John Dee in his hand and he chooses not to, and the show is much better at conveying the reasoning behind that decision than the comics. This version of John Dee sort of answers that question by itself. Although the visual effects were a bit strange, it was still very cool to see that smallness of Dee under the weight of Dream's kindness here, thanking him for breaking an object that contained so much of his power, and this was a step to making Dream feel whole again, at home, in the dreaming, and in control of his power. Lucifer warned Dream not to become too dependent on his tools. John destroyed the ruby after he thinks he's defeated Dream, something Dream would never have thought of doing himself, and this only enables Dream to take on the totality of his power, much of which had been bound up in the ruby. The adaptation of the comic Sound and Fury is more abbreviated. In the comic, the battle in the dreaming was longer and more complicated, and John's return to the mental institution was a full scene, including a conversation with another inmate. The episode is also more focused on the events immediately surrounding John, leaving out the bits where the comic issues cut away to show events in the outside world as the effects of the ruby spread. The influence of the ruby on the rest of the world is only being hinted at through overheard news reports in the diner. Dream has the ruby's power returned to him, and John is once again confined to the hospital, but John's use of the ruby caused widespread destruction. The news announcer mentions a mass suicide as well as a chain reaction from an accident that caused an explosion on the highway. While standing on a burning city street, Matthew asks Dream if he's able to undo the damage with his power restored, and Dream replies that the ruby didn't create it, and that mortals will have to rebuild for themselves. Another example by which we can fathom something of the character of Dream. Dream appears to be deciding the fates of humans based on how they make him feel. The actual choices of the humans involved are pretty irrelevant except with regards to how they affect him. This unkind approach to human life is something we will see repeated in one of the other Endless. And speaking of the devil, at the end of the episode, as Morpheus walks off into the distance, a pair of feet step into the frame, and the camera then moves up to give the audience our first introduction to Dream's sibling, Desire. We'll see much more of Desire later, so I won't go into the full background story now, but in the context of this episode, it shows an interesting dynamic between the concepts of Dream and the twins' Desire and Despair. Without their hopes and dreams, the people in the diner gave into their basic desires and despair without any filters. So that's really all you need to reflect on when you think about why desire and despair plot against dream. The Sandman comic on which the Diner episode is based, 24 Hours, inhabits a top spot for Gaiman fans as a challenging and existentially terrifying classic, and the Netflix adaptation exists in that uncomfortable space too, pushing ethical and aesthetic boundaries, needling at painful moments, and opening doors to places in the mind we'd rather keep shut. It's not for everybody, but for those who are willing, The Diner's and Rupturing Nightmare has moments that reflect on what it means to be human. And when paired with the next episode, The Uplifting Walk with Death, viewers experience the core of the Sandman's mantra, which is that life and death are inextricably intertwined, and dreams are nothing without nightmares. Alright, The Waking World, if you enjoyed this breakdown and you want to support this series, please subscribe, like the video to give it a boost, and share it with a fellow Sandman fan. This was Heads and Tails. Till next time.